Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Tina Ameroso. Tina is the former employer of Real Options, a nonprofit organization that supports women facing unplanned pregnancies. She's also a mom, a grandmother, and a recently adopted dog owner. So congratulations on joining the pet family. As a pet lover myself, I'm always glad to welcome somebody into the fold. But Tina, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. It's a pleasure having you on the program today.
I am excited to be here. Thank you. It's an honor to be on your show.
Well, thank you. And we got to give a shout out to Steve Ramona. Steve is one of the ultimate podcast connectors in the podcast world. He introduced us, said, Tina's got a great story. I think she'd be a great fit for your podcast. We had a pre-chat, found out that, there definitely was alignment for an episode, and we find ourselves recording today. And I'm, again, very excited to ask you some questions and have our audience hear about your journey, your challenges, and how you transcended those.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My first question is, tell our audience about the experience or experiences that have shaped your life path and your life passions today.
Well, I grew up in a family of both my mom and dad, an older brother and sister, and so I'm the youngest of three. We were raised Catholic. We had family dinners together every night. And growing up, my parents instilled a lot of beliefs and morals in our family. And it was a time where we were just strong, founded. Our foundation was strong. We knew our routine. We knew mom was going to take care of things. We knew dad was taking care of things. We didn't have to worry. But after entering junior high and high school, I got into a lot of trouble. I lived in a very, very strict Catholic home. My dad became a council member after a school board member, and we had to behave a certain way for the family image. And that wasn't something that I was willing to do for very long. I ventured out my own way. And when I was a teenager, I was 15 years old, and I faced an unplanned pregnancy. And that, at the time, that was a very, very shameful event for months and years to follow. But then I've also realized it became my story, and it is something that I have been able to use to help others and to speak to others and to thank those who have helped me on my journey throughout the trials and tribulations of expecting a child at 15 years old.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I was raised Catholic too, Tina, and, I was raised as a strict Catholic, and my mom was very, very religious, and I followed all the dogma of the Catholic Church and no sex before marriage and all of that. You didn't use your body indiscriminately. I walked away from the Catholic Church when I could, only because for me it just became too dogmatic. But I can imagine being pregnant in a Catholic household out of wedlock didn't go over too well.
It did not. Um, as I shared, my dad had a prominent figure in the city. They migrated from the Philippines when they were 15. They had me at the age of 33. And in our culture, and for them trying to create a better life for us than we would have had if they continued to live in the Philippines, it was very difficult for them to understand and accept
Yeah.
my unplanned pregnancy. We kept it a secret from my dad for a very long time. So if I can just share my journey of my pregnancy,
Yep.
I was, I want to say I thought I was 10 weeks along when I made my appointment for an abortion because I thought, you know what? There is no way I am going to have a baby. Dad's going to kill me. I'm going to be ostracized for my family. I'm going to embarrass our entire family. And this can't happen.
Mm.
So I went to the first abortion clinic. And when I went, I remember laying on the cold table. I remember the vacuum. I remember the noises. I can almost hear it. And when the doctor was ready to terminate my pregnancy, he looked at the nurse and said, "Did you was an ultrasound performed on this patient?" And she said, "Yes." And he said, "She is not 10 weeks along. She is over 12 weeks, which means we cannot do the abortion today. She's going to have to come in for 2 appointments." So, of course, that wasn't done. I scheduled an appointment. At that time, the abortion industry was so busy that I couldn't make an appointment for 5 weeks after, not anywhere in the county that I lived in. So 5 weeks later, I went to the appointment, and by this time, I was already almost 5 months.
Yep.
They performed the ultrasound, and after the ultrasound, the nurse came to me and said, "Your baby is in a breech position." And I didn't even know what that was. And she said, "Your baby's head is on top. We do not perform abortions with anyone who has a breech position baby in utero. It's just complicated, and it can cause a lot of problems with you and everything that's going on, everything that would pertain to that." So I said, "Okay, well, I can't move forward with this pregnancy. It's not going to happen." And she said, "Okay, well, there are 2 places in the state of California who would still perform the abortion: Los Angeles and Oakland." The closest place to me was Oakland, but I couldn't make another appointment for another several weeks. So by this time, I was 6 months pregnant. At that time, I had already felt my baby move. I was already visibly expecting. Although I wore big clothing to try to hide it, I was still expecting. I was still going to high school. And high school children or students your peers can be very, very cruel. So my name was written on bathroom walls and benches. My mom was getting phone calls about my pregnancy that I hadn't even revealed yet. When I walked into the clinic, I noticed the first thing that I thought of was, wow, all of us who are between maybe 14 years old and early college were visibly expecting. So I was thinking we all felt our baby move. We were all probably tired. We were either in high school or in college, ridiculed, shamed, whatever it may be. But that's what I saw when I first walked in. And when the ultrasound technician called me in the room and she said, you know what? We can go ahead and perform the abortion, and here's what is going to happen. So she told me, and she let me know that I was going to deliver a stillborn baby. And I said, yeah, nope, that is not going to happen. I am moving on with my pregnancy. By this time, my brother and my mom were in the waiting room, and they were encouraging the abortion due to, of course, the reasons I shared. And I said, I don't care what you tell them, but I'm not going through with this. So figure it out. And I remember going back to the waiting room. The receptionist closed the window, and a few minutes later, we were invited to the conference room with the doctors and the nurse and everyone pretty much in the clinic. And they all told my mom and my brother, Tina is not able to have this abortion. It's going to be costly. It's going to be risky. We're not going to be able to perform it. And I remember it was this devastation for all of us, but I was secretly thinking, thank goodness we're not doing this. That very same night, my brother dropped me off with his wife, and him and my mom told my dad about my pregnancy. And that night I was sent to live in Orange County with relatives to have my baby. And that way no one would know. It would be in secret. Tina's going to have her baby. She's going to place him up for adoption, and then she can come back home afterwards. However, after I did finally give birth a few months later and seeing my baby's beautiful face, I said, there is no way I am choosing adoption. Now, I already met his adoptive parents. They were amazing. We had lunch together. The adoptive mom was the nurse at the clinic for my prenatal care in Orange County. So we developed a good relationship. And I was torn, but I was very adamant that no one is going to have my child but me. No one is going to raise him. So I spent well over my stay in the hospital. It's amazing because nurses would come to me in the middle of the night, all shifts, and would say, Tina, I can't imagine what you're going through. But whatever it is, we're thinking about you. And we hope that you make the right decision for you and your son. My son's biological father's sister, so Eric's aunt, she lived about an hour away. And I said, I want to keep him. And she said, okay, I am going to get everything you need to keep your baby, and you could live with me. And I did. Between the car seats, the clothes that were donated, everything you can imagine to be able to raise the baby on my own. I did. However, come the sixth day of staying with her, being emotionally distraught, being ostracized from my family, and raising my son on my own in a place that I have never been to, was weighing on me. So by the sixth day, and I remember it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and Eric was crying. He was crying. He was hungry. He was wet. I don't remember at the time, but I remember he was crying. So I went to the refrigerator, took the Enfamil bottle from a can, put it in a bottle that was not sterilized, and gave it to him. Cold milk in a dirty bottle. And I distinctly remember the look on his face when it was almost as if he was in so much shock. And he looked at me like, "What are you doing?" And it was right then and there that I realized I am not fit to be a mother. I called the lawyer back the next morning and I said, "Call Eric's parents back. I want to place him in a loving home who will take care of him the way he deserves to be taken care of and raised. And I'm not fit to do that. I cannot do that." And the lawyer said, "Okay, my clients have had this happen to them twice. And here we go again. I'm going to give them the advice to not move forward." And I said, "Okay, well, then he's going to go to a different family. But I want them to be the parents to raise him." And later on that day, we met at the lawyer's office. I handed Eric to them, and I knew that was it. But I knew I couldn't keep him. So my parents picked me up, and a week later, this is, I think this is totally a God thing, but it was supposed to be a closed adoption. But when the lawyer gave me the paperwork, he left their number and their address on the paperwork. So a week later, I called the number and his mom answered the phone. And I said, "I can't live without my baby without knowing his progress. So can I call you once a week? Can you write me once a month? When anything goes on, can you just send me pictures? Anything?" And she said, "Tina, I have already bought a book telling him that he was chosen. And from the day he understands that he has been adopted, that is when he will comprehend everything you did for him." And then a few years later, I said, "Well, can I visit him?" And she said, "Yes, let's meet at Disneyland."
Wow.
And the following year, and a year later, and the next year. And now that is the spot where Eric and I meet, downtown Disney, when I go over there and I stay at his house with his mom and dad. And he comes over here and visits me every other year. And this is why I am a huge advocate for adoption. I know every story is different,
Mhm.
but when you choose to place your child in a loving adoptive home, you can choose an open adoption, a closed adoption. The birth mother is now in the driver's seat where she never was before. And for me, that was an event that I never thought would happen. Not 37 years ago. I believe my story has come full circle because of the choice I made. And no matter what, even if you have chosen or someone has chosen to terminate their pregnancy, whatever it may be, infertility, there are so many resources out there that are willing to help and encourage and walk through those bridges. And I still go through times where, almost 40 years later, I struggle with it. But because of the hope that I have and what has been done for me and the resources that have been provided, I'm proud that now I have 3 boys, 3 girls, 3 grandchildren, and 1 on the way. And I adopted a dog because a couple of my kids moved back home. But I know not every story has a great ending, but you can make that story of yours into a positive ending by what you choose and how you share it. And that's where I'm coming from today. And that's why I'm thankful to be on your podcast and to be able to do and share my testimony and my story with who would listen, with an audience who would listen.
Given the circumstances that you grew up with in a strict Catholic household with the cultural expectations, I could see why you would have considered an abortion and wanted to go through with that. I could see why you chose to do that, but I think to me, we're just listening. It's like God had other plans, that Eric was supposed to be born.
Yep.
And there were some other lessons that were to be taught, other things that you were going to discover. As I was listening to that, I'm thinking, boy, you want to talk about the importance of community, the redefinition of family in terms of you're part of his adopted family, and now their adopted family is part of your family. That transcends how we take a look at traditional families. And I mean, and the other thing is that you risked everything. Once you knew you couldn't get the abortion, once you decided you weren't going to get it, you risked everything to make sure he was born. You risked ostracization from your family. You were bullied in school. You risked a whole bunch of things just so your son could be born. For me, a different scenario, my mother was 18 and she had tuberculosis. And back then in 18, she was born in like the early 1900s. And back then, Tina, tuberculosis was a death sentence. But she fought for 6 years to live. And I look at it this way, if she didn't fight for her life, I wouldn't have mine. And if you didn't risk everything that you grew up with, everything that you stood for, your son wouldn't have been born. And you wouldn't have the relationship you had today. And I'm pretty sure if he's anything like your mother, like his biological mother, he's got to be a really, really good kid.
He values family, but he also learned that from his adoptive mom and dad. They are the ones who raised him, and they've allowed me to be a part of his life. They had a son, their own biological son, 7 years older than Eric. And when he got married, they sat me at the family table, and no one knew me. And once Eric and I started taking pictures together, everyone realized who I was. And that is something that it was just an honor because you don't usually see that.
No. What made this different? I know not all adoptive parents are readily welcome the biological parent, with contact with their adopted son or daughter. What was different in your case? Why do you think they were just so open to you being a part of Eric's life right from the get-go?
I think because they were grateful. I think that when you experience grace, you become grateful. When you experience another chance at what you couldn't have, you become grateful. And I wouldn't choose another family for Eric. They are the best parents, the best family who could have raised him. And I believe that God allowed me to go through everything that I went through to be strong enough and say, this is who I want. This is what I want. And I want to keep in contact with him. And I think he just prepared all of our hearts for it. Not every family is like that, but I think when those who are experienced or have experienced a loss, and then you have another opportunity to mend that, I think that's what changed or what allowed us to have a strong relationship together.
Yeah, I mean, they just sounded like great individuals, right, and you obviously chose them. At 15, your intuition and divine intuition had to just kick in and say, this is the family I want Eric to be a part of. And when the lawyer questions, says, look, we've done this 2 times. I don't know if I want to proceed a third time, not being sure that you were going to go through with it. You just said, look, I'm going to I will find a family for them, but I want them to have Eric. And I think that whatever you did convince them to say, okay, the third time's the charm. And sure enough, it was. So, and the other thing, your story resonated with me, and I think we might have talked about this during the pre-call. Um, my daughter, Janine, I call it transition to a new from the physical world to the spiritual world on March 1st, 2003, 10 months after giving birth to her only child. In my death, dying, and bereavement class, I tell my story. I tell the students they die because I want to be transparent with them
Right.
about my own history. Because if I want them to be able to comfortably talk about death, they need to see that I'm comfortable talking about my own experiences. But I told my female students, I said, if you come home and you tell your father that you're pregnant out of wedlock, and he goes absolutely ballistic, and he starts screaming and yelling, and he thinks that's the worst possible thing that could ever happen. You give him my phone number, you have him call me, and I will tell him the worst possible thing that could happen is not that your daughter got pregnant, but she didn't live to see her child grow up. And I said, by the time I'm done with your father, he's going to be loving you up. From my perspective, I just would have said, okay, this isn't the worst thing that can happen. Let's pull together as a family. Let's see what we can do to support each other through this. And that's, fortunately what our family did. But, the worst thing in the world isn't you get pregnant out of wedlock. The worst thing in the world is what happened to me. That's the worst thing in the world. And I always tell that story to give my students some perspective. And hopefully to give their parents some perspective. If
Right.
none of them have taken me up to call them, which means either they haven't gotten pregnant out of wedlock or their father's been okay with it. But that offer is always open to every class, past and present, that I would do that for, just based on my own history. So,
Well, Dave, I remember when we first spoke and we both shared our stories, and you shared your story with me. And I thought, how many people have regrets with what they could have done or should have done, but you stepped up when it was needed and right when it was time. And
yeah,
that is one of the reasons why I continued to pursue a professional relationship with you, because everybody has a story. Not everybody is willing to share it out of shame or guilt or fear of being judged. But this is our story, and it makes us who we are today.
mhm,
And you have that compassion, and I have that compassion. So
yeah,
our stories can gear us in different directions. But I think what you and I have in common, and many of the people that you interview, as well as Steve, Ramona, is what has become of your story and the
mm,
impact that it has created for others. Even if They never take you up on that offer,
Mhm.
but just to have that in the back of their mind, knowing, all right, if I need to, I can reach out.
Mhm.
If someone has gone through it, I can too. And I believe that's why we have a lot of support groups, because more and more people are willing to be transparent. Where, you know, back decades ago, everything was shameful if your home did not appear perfect.
Mm.
And so we're people who are broken. And I believe that our stories show us who we are, and it allows us to help, if not just one person, but many, many others.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, we are our stories, and the narrative isn't always made up of good stuff. There's a lot of the negative stuff and the challenges in between, but it's how we transcend those challenges that determine the kind of life we're going to lead and the type of impact we're going to have.
Right.
Um, I was talking to another guest who said, nothing ever comes in, we never grow out of just the good stuff that happens to us. There's no growth because there's no challenge to deal with. Because
Right.
when it's the challenges in life, it's the negative events, though that's where the growth occurs. That's where our greatest spiritual growth and awareness occurs as a result of how we choose to step up and address those challenges. And obviously you have in a big way, and you had to do that at 15, when you're thinking about high school, you're thinking about your junior prom, and now you're thinking about making adult decisions at a very young age. Boy, and with the adversity that you faced from all ends, you did just a tremendous job just developing resilience through all of that and creating a great life for your son. So, and,
Thank
you
you.
know, I think the Lakotas Indians have a saying that we will be forever known by the tracks that we leave behind. And so I always tell anybody, make sure the tracks are memorable and that your legacy is going to be carried on long after you leave the physical world. So I want to switch and talk about real options. I know you're no longer working for them anymore, but I know they were really just helpful for you in your own journey. How did you become involved with real options? And tell us about their mission and the services that they provide.
I became involved with Real Options because two of my very, very close friends have shared, hey, Tina, have you thought about working for Real Options? This is when I was searching for something, a mission that I truly believed in and something that I wanted to pursue with passion. I worked at Apple, I worked at Sony, I worked at Stanford, and I thought, I want to work for something fulfilling. And I didn't even know anything about Real Options, but I called, and not too long after, they gave me a call back and said, you know what? We'd love to have you as our community outreach manager. And that gave me the push that I never had, but that I needed in a spiritual level, I think, to say, you know what? Share your story. And so Real Options offers, even though I haven't been there, I still support them in every way. And they offer for men, women, for unplanned pregnancies, also if for infertility, for those who have had what reproductive loss. So it can be infertility, it could be abortion, it could be adoption, it could be miscarriage. And they walk through that with you, with women who choose life for their children and who choose to raise their children. They will see and have a pregnancy or prenatal visits for up to 6 months until they
Mhm.
find their own insurance. Real Options also helps them with insurance, signing up for a pediatrician, for someone who can walk with them through their pregnancy, who can deliver their baby. We offer STD testing, you name it, we're able to do it. We provide formula, diapers, everything that the baby needs for the first 2 years of his or her life, as well as prenatal care and maternity clothes. So that is what we do. We come alongside any woman or man who is facing an unplanned pregnancy. We have male counselors and female optimal health counselors who can coaches, who can walk with them through this. So even though I'm no longer with them, I'm a firm believer of what they do, and I'm proud of it. And I just shared what my story on Tuesday night with a Kiwanis club in the Bay Area and shared about real options and who we are and what they do. And a couple of women who were there were actually former patients. So we have 4 clinics in the Bay Area, 2 in San Jose and Oakland, and I'll have to remember where the next one is or where the other one is. But that's who we are and that's what we do.
I think it's important because a lot of times, particularly with unplanned pregnancies, you could have used those resources back then that there are now to help you ensure that you were going to make the right decisions about Eric, the right, childcare, the right childcare rearing practices, everything. And it sounds like they, and that there's no income requirements or anything. Is this a free service or?
Free service.
Wow. And how many individuals, men and women, does Real Options serve in a year?
Well, I don't want to guess because I
Okay.
don't want to give you inaccurate information, but I will say in 2024, over 7,000 lives have been safeguarded through us going into schools. So our 3 missions are preventative,
Yes.
going into schools, talking about matters of the heart. Another one is, of course, the one that we try to avoid where they're already in that position. And then the last one is hope and healing.
Yes.
So everything that they go through, the 3 stages, those are our missions.
And I'm glad you go into schools and talk about unplanned pregnancies because sex is a taboo topic. And as far as I know, everybody's still having sex, everybody's still getting pregnant. And, I think the more we can take the mystery out of a taboo topic and take the fear out, the more that we can have honest conversations about it, the better off we are. And the best time to do it is during the formative years when they're younger so that they can prevention is about helping them make informed decisions about what it is they should do with their bodies. And the sooner we can start that, the better off we are. So I'm glad Real Options is doing that. I can see why you're so aligned with their mission.
I'm happy to be a part of their mission, even though I'm no longer an employee, but I completely support them.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for what they've done for me to be able to share my story when I don't think I would have had the opportunity to do so without that runway.
Yeah. And they couldn't have a more passionate, better aligned advocate than you, Tina.
Thank you very much, Dave.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm going to ask you this question. If you had your almost 16-year-old self in front of you today, what would you say to her?
To love yourself, accept who you are. Don't try to be or keep up with those around you that you think are perfect or have a better life than you, but be confident and be grateful that you're an individual and you were created and formed to be someone different and to love yourself. Even today, I face issues that I think, gosh, if I would have only thought about this back then, right? And I think we all have those types of thoughts. But I think for me especially, I have that opportunity to tell that to my kids today. And so I I not only tell myself that, but I think that my kids know how much they're loved and they're wanted and they're confident because they've also heard my story. And I've struggled with so many things during my life and still struggle. But that's what I ultimately would say to myself, just to love myself.
I think that's a beautiful message because we're so busy earning everybody else's love by, by through the things that we do that we think are going to please them, that we forget we were born with love and that we can love ourselves unconditionally because we are by nature genuinely loving human beings. And then the human contract gets in the way and conflicts get in the way. We tend to forget that. So, it's funny, somebody asked me what my favorite song is. I know it's going to sound like off the beaten track, but trust me, I'm going to pull this together. And I told them, it depends on my mood, depends on what I'm looking at. And there's a song by Sting, and it was written in 1985, and he wrote this, I think it was after the divorce from his first wife. It's called Fortress Around My Heart. And he talked about using the metaphors of battle to build emotional distance
Mm.
between with those that we love, and also the process of reconciliation after that. Not so much, and I think, for me, I was given some thought to this. Yes, it's reconciliation with those who we have hurt or we perceive have hurt us, but it's also reconciliation with ourselves.
Yeah.
I wanted to share that with you and our respective audiences. So,
Well, thank you. If it's okay to share a verse from the Bible, that is something that there's one verse that I cling on to. And when my children and my grandchildren were born, it's in Psalm 139. And the story behind it, the person who wrote it had gone through a lot of turmoil in his life. But it says, we were created. God, you created me in the most hidden parts. You know my coming and going. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. What no one else was there, but he actually knitted us. And I think about Eric and how he created him and my children and how they're so different, but then they're so alike because that is just who the God I serve does. He creates us with individuality and a presence that we're able to love one another, love ourselves, and be reconciled with him.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's a beautiful message. And I was going to ask you if you to leave us with one takeaway for today, but you already did that. So I appreciate that and sharing your faith and sharing what has gotten you to this point where you are and has gotten you to be living such an impactful life in honor of those that you've served and um, in honor of and with your son Eric. So I think it's great, and I have appreciated so much you taking the time sharing your story today and
yeah.
also trusting me with your story. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for your audience listening. And my hope and prayer is that if this could change or impact one life in a positive way, then it's all worth everything that I've gone through. So this is my story, and I'm happy to share it with whomever would be willing to listen.
You got it. My last question for you, though, I'm not going to let you get out that easy. Okay.
Okay.
My last question for you. People want to contact you, find out more about real options. What's the best way for them to do that, Tina?
They could actually contact me personally, and I would put them in contact with Real Options, or they could even Google Real Options, www.realoptions.net. Or they can contact me personally, and I'm more than happy to speak with anybody or walk a line alongside or give them the resources that anyone needs so that they can move forward and have healing themselves.
And I can put all contact information in the episode notes,
Okay.
when we go live. So, Tina, with that, thanks so much for such a great conversation today. I really enjoyed it and hope we can do it again sometime.
You know what? I would look forward to it because I think our stories, if someone doesn't listen to it today or tomorrow, maybe a year from now, it would impact another life or it would make a difference for someone else.
I think so. That's the nice thing about doing a podcast is you can record it and a year later somebody picks it up and it has an
Yep.
impact. So,
Yes.
Tina, again, thank you so much for just a wonderful conversation today. And I wish you well in the future and good luck being a new dog parent.
Thank you. And then a grandmother of 4, now 4.
Yeah. And hopefully you have time to sleep with all of that. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. And with that, that is a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.